Week 15, another episode of The Install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. That's the main man right there. Greg, always a pleasure to have you. A little bit of shaky ground around here locally, but we're surviving, and I'm excited to at least talk about what should be an interesting football game. We'll see if it actually lives up to the hype.
I assume you're speaking about the matchup with the Chargers.
It's certainly not the Jags matchup. There was nothing exciting about that.
So we don't want to discuss the Jags matchup, huh? It obviously did not go well.
No, I think we very much should talk about what the Jags did to them really did whatever they wanted to them on defense. I guess that's as good a place as any to start, Greg. Trevor Lawrence looked phenomenal. Was not bogged down by the toe, certainly, and certainly wasn't bothered by any pressure that the Titans tried to get on him. Had a career passing day and only his second career road win. He was great to watch.
Yeah, and I think it's funny. We know what the Titans offense is, and people can get upset about the offensive approach, a run team that doesn't really throw the ball with a whole lot of efficiency. And it's easy to discuss that and debate that. But I think over the last 2 weeks, there's been a larger issue here. The inability to stop the passing game and the inability to generate any pressure on the quarterback. This is a team that we used to speak about even earlier this season. And I know some people are hurt. I don't think people, maybe they understand it now, but maybe a lot of people didn't understand just how important Danico Autry is to this team, particularly in their nickel and dime fronts. But, obviously against the Eagles 2 weeks ago, they didn't get near Jalen Hurts. Lawrence had 43 dropbacks this week. He was not sacked. The Titans were clearly not able to generate any consistent pressure on him with their four-man D-line pass rush. We know they're not a high percentage blitz defense. So, I think the defense is probably something that most fans thought we wouldn't be discussing as we go into week 15 with the belief that, hey, this team does have a really good defense and that's not going to be a problem. But it has been a problem the last number of weeks. Now, granted, they've had a number of issues and injuries in the secondary, and that forced them this week to play Hooker as their slot corner. Now, they have used him in the big nickel, which is different than using him as their slot corner in true passing situations. And that's what they were forced to do this week, which forced them to increase their zone coverage percentage and made them more predictable on defense.
Yeah, without that pass rush, it's the thing this year that consistently made them special. I think as a team to be able to compete, to go to Kansas City the way that they did and try and keep themselves in it. And really, since the Bengals game, Greg, I know they got to Burrow once in that game, but he was getting the ball out so quickly it really didn't matter how close they were able to get because 2 steps and it was out. But yeah, without Danico Autry and Jeff Simmons dealing with an ankle injury, it feels like they've hit a bit of a tipping point. Now, Autry practiced today for the first time in 3 weeks, so that at least is a positive sign. It's still up in the air as we tape the podcast on a Wednesday afternoon, whether he'll be able to go. But that I think has been the biggest takeaway for me this season, Greg, is that they have done so well to replace a variety of different players, but that dude is so critical to not just his own ability to produce, but the ability to create for others, as you mentioned, in their nickel and dime, and it's completely evaporated.
Yeah, well, as we have discussed a number of times throughout the season, when they're in dime and Autry and Simmons are inside, they're so good with their stunts inside, their TT stunts, whether Autry is the penetrator and Simmons is the looper behind him, or whether it's vice versa. Either way, they're so good together, but that's gone away because without Autry, Simmons, there's a connection and a chemistry there that has worked very effectively. But yeah, the inability to rush the quarterback is a big problem. And with the injuries they've had in the secondary and have to move people around and play different people, we knew that a few weeks ago. Mitchell was a healthy scratch, and this week he's playing every snap at outside corner. You don't want to be in that situation going into the stretch run of the season, and that's the situation they find themselves. And that necessitates and dictates changes in how you play, because now what you're looking to do is you're looking to make sure that you don't expose limitations of players. So you're playing a little more reactively than proactively. And no coach is comfortable playing that way, but they also don't want to give up 60-yard touchdowns.
Well, that's the thing. They've been losing those one-on-one matchups down the field as well, consistently in the last couple of weeks. But on the offensive side of the ball, Greg, I mean, I don't know how much you get done with the offensive line situation. They've tried a variety of different things. They had an extra offensive lineman, LaRaven Clark, on the left side for a handful of snaps. They tried different things to help Dennis Daly, chipping in certain situations to try and give him some help. He still allowed 6 pressures. It was a tough scene to watch, and obviously, you turn the ball over 4 times, you're going to lose the football game. 9 times out of 10, and probably a higher percentage than that. But like, as far as the Titans' offense goes, what do you kind of make of the way that they look right now?
Well, I think that they have a defined way in which they want to play. And what I'm about to say is not a scoop or anything that is unknown, but they have a defined way in which they want to play. And that is, they want Henry to be the foundation, and they want to work off that. And if you can't play that way for whatever reason, lack of production, the score dictates otherwise, they're a little bit stuck, Buck. And again, that is not a statement of opinion. That's what the tape shows. They're a little bit stuck. They're not really a passing team. And they're a little bit stuck as well. You hit on something that is very important. Now they get to, let's say, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. And what do they need to do or feel the need to do? They feel the need to chip to help both of their offensive tackles. So what does that do? It takes 2 receivers out of being primary type receivers. Now they're secondary receivers. So you only can send 3 out really as primary, and that puts some limitations on your passing game. But, I think that, look, I think a play to me was really telling this past week. And it just, I think it's important to say it. So they're losing 20-14 going into the half. Okay. Yep. No problem. So the Jaguars come out and have a drive over 7 minutes, and they score a touchdown. So now the score is 27-14. And you can argue, hey, you're still in the game, which you are. But they're also not a big play offense. It's not like the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bengals, teams like that can just automatically hit a 50-yarder and they're right back in the game. So what do they do on their first offensive snap after they're now down by 2 scores? And don't forget, we're now in the middle of the 3rd quarter.
Right.
And the nature of a drive like the Jaguars had is a little bit demoralizing. It's not like the Jaguars score on 3 plays and you say, okay, we still have the whole second half left. Nothing's changed. All of a sudden, there's only a quarter and a half left in the game. And what do they do on their first play? They line up with 6 offensive linemen and 2 tight ends. So, this is not a team that thinks in terms of let's attack with the pass game. And at some point in this league, if you want to get where you want to get to, and we know how super competitive Mike Vrabel is, again, I don't know the answers here. I can pose the questions,
right,
but you're going to have to be far more proactive and aggressive with your pass game at some point in time. And you can't keep falling back, not the team, but just people in general on the idea, well, they don't have great weapons. Then you have to scheme stuff, but you have to throw the football and you have to attack with the pass game.
And that's just, it seems counterculture to what it is that they philosophic, the way that they philosophically approach a lot of these games, Greg. Because I mean, you just mentioned any degree of score separation. Like if a team puts together a drive like you're talking about with the Jags, where they kill half the quarter, they are not willing to push it that way. And that's been, I think, the biggest question for us, or one of the biggest questions all year long, is we've seen Ryan Tannehill be able to operate a passing offense at a higher level. Now, granted, things were different in 2020 and 2021, or really rather 2019, than the team that we're looking at now. But that score separation, as soon as teams get that on them, it feels like they're dead in the water.
But that can't, again, just speaking philosophically, that's what we're doing right now. That can't be, no one's interested in excuses. We're in the NFL. Every team has injuries. Every team lines up with players that, when it gets to be week 14, week 15, that you didn't anticipate lining up with. That happens. That's the league. The Bengals just won a game where they, Higgins played 1 snap and Boyd played 2 snaps. And then they had to go to their 4th and 5th receiver to play along with Chase. These things happen in the league. that can't shut down everything you're doing. You know, I think if it does, then philosophically you have to think that through. Because if one injury or even two injuries, because you know what, injuries happen, shuts down what you are, then you're not enough. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Then you're not enough.
Yeah. No, I think that's the most concise way anybody could put it. I'll tell you who's more than enough, or at least he looked like that against the Dolphins. Justin Herbert. Good Lord, what a day! He was incredible throughout the course of this game, Greg, and it was good to see them kind of operating on a higher level. Right,
Yep.
Mike Williams back for the first time in a couple of weeks, and certainly caught. I mean, he was catching it literally everything that was around him. He had 6 targets, he had 6 receptions, 116 yards, a touchdown, and a 55-yarder as an explosive play. I mean, the way that they got Herbert, basically like moving the launch point, I guess, for lack of a better term, Greg, like moving him outside of the pocket and allowing him to operate that rate. It really I mean, he was at his most efficient. I saw the numbers courtesy of ESPN Stats and Info, 10 of 11, 164 in the touchdown, outside the pocket in this
Yeah.
game. He was so much fun to watch.
He moved a lot because he had to. I
Right.
mean, there were plays in which there was design movement clearly, but their O-line, which is not very good, by the way, had issues in pass protection, and Herbert was forced to move. And he was outstanding with his downfield vision and ball placement on the move. You know, and their offense at its core is incredibly rhythmic, and that returns to our conversation about the lack of a pass rush by the Titans. Herbert's not necessarily a quarterback, particularly on early downs. Obviously, everything changes on 3rd and long, but on early downs, he's hard to sack because they're very rhythmic. The ball comes out. So this is going to be a very interesting matchup for the Titans D. And now that they have everybody back, because Williams is back, Allen's back, while they were out, Josh Palmer, who you're very familiar with, has showed himself to be a quality wide receiver who's a really good 3 and is actually more talented than that and could be more than that depending on what the future holds. So, you know, you're dealing with a team that has a lot of weapons. They have a really good receiving back in Eckler. The O-line is an issue. And again, I don't know, you know, based on what's happened with the Titans in recent weeks, we don't know at this point. Right now, we'd have to say that their sub-front pass rush is a bit of a question mark, you know, unless Autry's back.
Right. And certainly watch, I mean, even Gerald Everett, like the tight end that the Chargers have, they find ways to get him in space and he just makes plays. Like it's really cool to see them kind of operating that way. And you mentioned the offensive line. Slater, the stud left tackle, has been out for a considerable amount of time. I don't think, it doesn't sound like it's going to be this week, but Staley was talking as if both he and Joey Bosa may be able to return off injured reserve here in the near future, which would be huge for them as they kind of get down the stretch.
Sure, and keep in mind that they're playing Salyer, the rookie from Georgia, who I'm sure you're familiar with, being in SEC country. Everybody thought he was a guard coming out, and he's played left tackle. He's been very up and down. This past week, they started Farrell, I think his name is. I can't remember.
Matt Farrell?
No, it's he was actually a big time recruit who went to Stanford, but he was an undrafted player, and he only made his 2nd NFL start this past week. You know, Sunday night. It was a Sunday night game. So I mean, their O-line has not been really good, and Herbert has had to try to make chicken salad out of you know what. So, but he can make great throws on the move, and then he's got the big arm that when they do call a shot play, he certainly can get the ball down the field over the top of the defense.
So defensively for LA, I mean, this is back-to-back sluggish performances by Miami, and Tua didn't look great, obviously, throughout the course of this game. And I wonder, Greg, what you made of what was happening, because like when I watched, based on our conversations, the way that I watched Tua on Sunday and then went back and watched it here yesterday, he looked like he was throwing to spots that have been open all season, except the Chargers were sitting on those route concepts and making sure that Tua was throwing into traffic more often than he has. I don't know how much of that is accurate, but that watching Tua play, that was the sense that I got, because he was still making those spot throws. It just, there was defenders sitting there where there normally aren't.
Well, the Chargers did a couple of things which really take a lot of guts, and Brandon Staley has guts because I've been around him, and he has guts. So the Chargers played a lot of man coverage and a lot of press man. And teams normally, I mean, throughout this whole season, you've not really seen teams play press man coverage against the Dolphins because of the concern that you're going to get beat over the top with the speed of Hill and with the speed of Waddle. So they played press because the way they run their pass game with the quick rhythm throws by Tua, you're not going to get to Tua. So what's the only other option? It's to disrupt the receivers. So if you disrupt neither, which is the way most teams have played this year,
Right.
what you get is what they've done for most of the year, which is Tua dropping back with his really quick feet, quick setup, quick delivery, turning the ball loose to receivers who are in open space. Okay, the Chargers said, we're going to press. So we're not going to give you space. You're not going to, there's not just going to be guys sitting there wide open.
Right.
Okay. They're going to be covered. And now we're challenging the receivers and we're challenging Tua. So they played press man with a healthy dose of cover two, and cover two, because you have two deep safeties, also allows corners to disrupt routes off the ball. So that was their basic profile. And it worked. They only got burned one time on the 60-yard touchdown to Hill. But other than that, Tua was not throwing to Waddle and Hill on those rhythmic in-breaking routes that we've seen all year because they weren't wide open. So, again, people are saying that's the blueprint. Well, not every team can do that.
Well, that was my next question, because
the Bills, who they play this
sounds
week,
so simple to say, but like
the Bills play the Dolphins this week on Saturday night. The Bills don't play like that. They're not going to play that way, which doesn't mean they're never going to play man. I don't want to make it seem like, there'll be 70 snaps and they won't play one snap of man coverage, but that's not the way the Bills play. And the Bills have a really good defense. And while they may tweak something here and there, they're not going to change their entire defensive approach, because that's not the way Sean McDermott or Leslie Frazier is. So not every team is going to do that. But it worked this week. And by the way, Mike McDaniel and staff, they know that it worked, and they'll have some, I would imagine they'll have some responses to it. Maybe it's going to be more motion. Maybe it's going to be more formation variation. Maybe it's more bunches, stacks, things that prevent, disruption of routes off the line of scrimmage. There's always responses. This is all a chess match. It's a tactical chess match every single week. People who say that's the blueprint, that's just an easy thing to say. It means nothing, because this is not going to happen every week.
And I think it's so easy, at least for people who consume football casually, Greg. I think it's easy for people to lose sight of that, because it's just about what can you do in this one game to game plan to stop this thing and then be able to move on to the next opponent and get out cleanly. Not can this be a copy and paste situation week after week after week. I think most people are informed enough about that, but I do think that sometimes we lose sight.
Yeah, and I mean, even some people who talk the game and know the game start talking blueprint, and I've never been a blueprint guy because, look, are there really good offenses through the years that struggle a little more with something than with something else? Of course, but just saying then, well, let's play on every play and we've got them stopped, it doesn't work like that. I mean, if you're a really good off, it that's back to a point we've talked about in the case of the Titans for years, but it's a general point as well. When people say, well, they're playing 8 in the box, you can't run. Well, no, of course you can. Great running teams always run against 8 in the box because that's the way the defenses play them, because they're trying to stop the run. So that doesn't mean you can't run. It just means, how do you get to your runs so that an 8th guy or an unblocked defender is not a factor based on your run game concepts. So, if you're a team in the passing game where your quarterback has a little more trouble versus zone than man, that doesn't mean you just play zone every play and that means the quarterback can't play. It doesn't, it's not as cut and dried as that. It's not a mathematical equation.
I'm going to assume that Dolphins and Bills made the matchup show this weekend.
Yeah, well, we actually got a change. ESPN was good enough to give us a change in our schedule.
Right, because of the triple header.
Could not air a Sunday morning show and do the Bills-Dolphins game, which is arguably the best game on the schedule this week, which plays Saturday night in prime time. So we actually have 3 Saturday airings this week, so we could do the Bills-Dolphins game.
Excellent. That's the NFL matchup show. Sal Pal, Darius Butler, and Greg doing a great job. What else are you working on this week for the matchup show, Greg? There's a couple of games. I mean, Titans and Chargers.
That's in the show.
is obviously interesting here locally, but I'm looking.
Oh, that's a big game for both teams because
Oh, sure.
The Titans have been struggling. They're on the road. The Chargers are obviously, just won a big game and they're clearly in the playoff hunt. Maybe they're not going to win the division, but they're clearly in the playoff hunt. So that's a big game. And Commanders Giants, which is Sunday Night Football this week. Maybe nationally people don't see that as wow, two teams that are must see, but that is a really huge game. So clearly that's in our show. So no, there's a number. We're getting to the point, Buck, where there's a lot of teams fighting for playoff spots, and there's a lot of teams still in the mix. So I mean, look, I'm doing Cowboys Jaguars this week.
I was just going to ask if that
Yeah.
game made it, because that's fascinating to me.
I'm doing that game. Trevor Lawrence has played good football over the last month, and the Cowboys are coming off a very surprising game. And the Jags are an improving football team.
Was there any, just sticking with the Cowboys for a second, Greg, was there any trend that you saw? Because they didn't play great for about 3/4 against the Colts, and then the turnover avalanche happened, and they had 33 points in the fourth quarter. They played Houston close. I haven't had the opportunity to watch that Houston-Dallas game yet.
Nor have I, so I can't speak to it. I haven't seen the tape yet.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's later, probably tomorrow or even Friday, but I haven't seen that tape yet.
Well, then you'll have to check out the NFL Matchup Show, available on ESPN on Saturdays. Of course, ESPN Plus on demand. Set your DVR so you never miss a minute. Great stuff. Greg, a pleasure as always. Enjoy the football, and we'll look forward to the Matchup Show on Saturday.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.